one of the most dangerous fighters Rocky's ever faced versus one of the smartest fighters from the Creed movies. If Clubber Lang fights Damian Anderson, who would come out on top? Before we can get to the matchup itself, let's talk about our fighters. Clubber Lang is one of Rocky's opponents. Brash, brutal, and one of the most notorious trash talkers in the franchise. If one considers the first part of his life depicted in Rocky Legends as canon, Lang previously did time in prison before becoming a boxer, even competing in fights that were held exclusively in said facility. After getting out, he rose through the ranks and became the #1 contender to Rocky's title after Balboa's 10th title defense. Although not explicitly stated, it's implied Clubber won all of his fights by KO and at the very least was undefeated, as stated by the announcer before his first bout with Rocky. Despite having a limited style of seemingly only throwing hooks, Lang was strong and vicious to the point where Rocky could not even trade punches with him, and even Apollo Creed made note of Clubber's strength on commentary. There's also one fact that should be made well aware. Clubber Lang was the first opponent that forced Rocky to completely revamp his entire fighting approach. By the time the rematch occurred, Balboa was not only notably slimmer, but quicker and fought more from the outside, even developing a strategy to let Lang exhaust himself. That brings me to Clubber's weaknesses. Because he relies specifically on powerful punches, his style is very predictable and he can exhaust himself against an opponent very quickly if he's not careful. As seen in the rematch between the two, Rocky employed the rope-a-dope and quickly turned the tide to the point where Clubber was not only able to fight back, but was so winded that punches from Rocky were lifting him off the ground. All that aside, Clubber is still very formidable and presented a unique challenge to Rocky. An opponent who can not only take Rocky's best punches, but could also deliver punches even stronger than what Rocky could throw, and he's also the only in-ring major opponent that Rocky had to put away early, as Apollo, Ivan, and Mason Dixon were all opponents he fought to the final round each time. Lang is easily a top dream match contender for much of the franchise, with the fandom wanting to see him against the likes of Apollo Creed, Ivan Drago, and Adonis Creed. Clubber's opponent is Damian "Dame" Anderson, the latest major opponent in the Rocky and Creed franchise. Unlike Lang, Anderson began boxing at a much earlier age, winning the regional Golden Glove Championship as a teenager. Before his incarceration, Dame was a top prospect and childhood friend of Adonis Creed, who brandished a gun in Creed's defense. Despite being locked up for 18 years, Anderson never stopped training and kept himself in shape. Seeking aid from Adonis for a title shot, Creed denies helping Anderson at first, which leads to Dame orchestrating a plot to injure Victor Drago and thrust himself into the title picture. Anderson uses questionable tactics and knocks out Felix Chavez in the 3rd round to become unified world heavyweight champion. After Adonis finds out about Dame's plot, this causes him to not only come out of retirement, but to defeat Dame to become champion for a second time. Like Clubber, Dame is strong. His strength is enough to throw Chavez off guard and also gives Adonis a run for his money in their fight. What separates him from Lang is that Dame is a student of the game. He studies tactics, his opponents, and their weaknesses, using this knowledge to attack his opponents when they are most vulnerable. Anderson also favors clinches, near borderline illegal tactics, and tends to trap his opponents in the corner while also feigning punches so he can counter. That being said, although in much better conditioning than Clubber, Dame sometimes still relies on power punches and this can drain his stamina. He also has a habit of letting his anger cloud his judgment, causing him to become unfocused. Weaknesses aside, from a character and storyline perspective, Diamond Dame Anderson is certainly a fresh character, even if he is a mix of both Clubber Lang and Tommy Gunn. His storyline helped flesh out the details of Adonis' life a little bit more, even giving some new insight to the first Creed film, and I love Creed 3's take on Damian as being Rocky Balboa's title shot with a dark twist. Now comes the big question: who would win? I believe there's been some videos done on this topic already, most notably by Crisis, but I would say I have to disagree with this take and elaborate on why I think Dame would be the winner here. Now, full disclaimer, I'm not entirely sure if Big Rumble Boxing Creed Champions is canon or not. I've been trying to find an accurate source, but like Rocky Legends, I think it does take some liberties in filling in the gaps of what happened between the movies. I also cannot find anything about Ivan Drago fighting Clubber Lang post Rocky IV, though I remember vaguely it was said somewhere, but I also don't know if it's in Rocky: The Ultimate Guide, which was published with cooperation by Stallone and MGM. This is considered to be the official guide and lore book to the original 6 films, as this came out around the same time as Rocky Balboa. All of that out of the way, in the event that Clubber Lang is stronger than Dame, and we'll also assume younger, he still has 2 disadvantages here. his very basic style where he literally just throws hooks, and his poor conditioning. Creed 3 is shaky on the exact age of Adonis and Dame. In fact, the Rocky and Creed timeline has always been inconsistent, but assuming that both are in their mid to late 30s, Anderson has great conditioning due to the fact that he takes the fight all the way to the final round before getting knocked out by Adonis. Not to mention, once he had Chavez right where he wanted him in the third round, questionable tactics aside, he launched a full-out assault that ended the fight. In fighting, conditioning is everything. It affects how many strikes you throw, your movement, how long you last from round to round, etc. One best quote to sum this up is what Mickey said in Rocky 2. For a 45-minute fight, you gotta train hard for 45,000 minutes. How conditioning helps you is something I came to be familiar with very quickly when I competed in my first Taekwondo tournament last year, and while it's obviously not the same sport, the concept is the same. You have to keep up your stamina. This is what led to Clubber's downfall in Rocky 3. Because he fell for Rocky's trash talk and strategy, Lang became quickly winded against a much more confident and agile Rocky. Dame does trash talk just as much as Lang does at times, though more so outside the ring, but I believe Lang could bait Dame into making a mistake and getting punished for it, leading to a knockdown at the very least. However, again, Lang has a very basic style. Because of how Diamond Dame operates, there's no doubt that he would study everything about Clubber to catch his opponent off guard. And if Lang is the type of person to fall for a strategy to exhaust himself, imagine the mind games Anderson would play against this fool. I also understand that Crisis pointed out that age may play a factor in this, but that also clearly didn't stop Rocky in Rocky Balboa. And yes, I understand that Mason breaking his hand on Rocky's hip was written to equalize the fight. Even the age gap between Clubber and Dame would be much smaller compared to Mason Dixon and Rocky Balboa. Clubber's exact age in Rocky 3 is unknown, and even then, what year the film takes place is also inconsistent, but the Rocky video game states that he's 28 years old while Rocky is 34 at the time. This does make sense as Rocky was 30 in Rocky 1, with his first fight with Apollo taking place on January 1st, 1976, while the rematch took place on Thanksgiving Day, November 25th later that year. And Rocky would have been 31 by that point because he was already 30 at the opening of Rocky, which took place on November 25th, 1975. And yes, I understand now this is an overanalysis at this point, but it's what I do. In Rocky 3, Rocky also says that it's been 3 years since the city took him in, so him being 34 is pretty accurate. If Dame Anderson was 16 to 18 when he was locked up, which I believe he and Adonis were the same age, or at most Dame is maybe no more than 2 years older than Creed, that means he would be at least 34 to 36 as he's been incarcerated for 18 years, making him only 6 to 8 years older than Lang in this dream matchup. And if Rocky could beat Lang at 34 years old, I don't think age really plays a factor in this match. But how would the fight play out? I think Diamond Dame would have Clubber figured out. He would anticipate the punches he would throw and make note of what little footwork that his opponent has. Anderson's ego may get him to try to trade punches with Clubber at first, but then he would quickly realize that he couldn't and change strategies. I think there would be some questionable tactics again that Dame would use, which could lead to an all-out brawl. But because Lang is also from the streets, I think he would also try some of his own as a back and forth. Eventually, Lang would get tired and Diamond Dame would bait Clubber similar to how Rocky did and go for the knockout in the third or fourth round. The mind games and conditioning would give Damien the victory here. But who do you think would win? Give me some of your thoughts and check out some of these other Rocky and Creed videos.